Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is the Sonship Review Part 7, and this is session 54. We left off last time reading right there when he talked about call his name Jezreel. So now what I need to do is show you the meaning of the name Jezreel. It has two meanings. The first meaning is scattered. And let me give you a verse that goes along with that. And by the way, the interesting thing about that is, well, I'll give you the second one here, and I'll give you the why of those. The second meaning of Jezreel is to plant or sow. Now, wait a minute. One of those is to scatter, and one of those is to sow. But they're really talking about two very different things. I know you're thinking about if you scatter seed, you just kind of throw it out there, and you plant seed. But I want to show you the difference here. Anyway, that's the two meanings of the name. And by naming his firstborn son, what are the two messages that Hosea is sending to Israel? The first one is that God will scatter the northern kingdom among the nations. In other words, when he names his son Jezreel, he is sending them the first message that you guys are going to be taken captive. What Leviticus 26 said is going to come true for you, and you're going to be scattered among the nations. Let me give you a verse for this. 2 Kings 17:6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and Habor by the river of Gozan in the cities of the Medes. And we know that indeed did happen to them in 722 BC. But here's the second thing, and that is God is also going to plant them again in their land in the future. One is to scatter them out of their land, and the second one is to bring them back and plant them or sow them in their land again in the future. And now let me give you some verses for this. Jeremiah 31 verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel, look at this next part, will gather him and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. Now this is Jeremiah. He is using that shepherd and flock analogy, but look what he's saying. He that scattered him is also going to gather him. If God scatters them, what he's saying is, I'm not finished with you just because you went in to the fifth course of punishment. But he's going to gather them. Now let me go back to Hosea and show you the same issue in Hosea. Hosea 2:14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her, and I will sow her unto me in the earth. And I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them which were not my people, Thou art my people. And they shall say, Thou art my God. I want you to notice the terminology here, because here's what they do. He has a son. Hosea has a son, and he's going to call his name Jezreel. And that son's name has two meanings. The first one is to scatter. And that is exactly what he does when the fifth course of punishment comes upon them. But the second meaning of the name is to sow or to plant. Now, what is the difference if you're talking about putting out seed? What's the difference between scattering seed and sowing seed? When you sow something, you're not just throwing it out there to lay on top of the ground. When you sow seed, you're putting it in the ground. So when he scattered them, it's like he just threw them out there. But when he's bringing them back, he is going to sow them unto him in the earth. That's when you put the seed down in the ground. What in the world is that talking about? It's talking about when God brings them back into the land and He plants them or sows them in the land, listen, He's going to tell them, once I do that, you're never going to be plucked up again. You're going to be in the land permanently. Now everybody looks at that and what they want to say is, so God sowed them in the land in May of 1948. Not knowing how to rightly divide the word, they came in and they took a historical event in the dispensation of grace and they made it the fulfillment of Hosea 2 or Jeremiah 31. Is that really what God is talking about there? When on this timeline is God going to bring Israel back? Now, by the way, hey, let's talk about the southern kingdom of Judah. They went away into Babylon, right? 70 years captivity. During the Medes and the Persians, didn't they get to come back into Israel? But was that the fulfillment of Jeremiah 31? Nope. Nope. Because there's something sitting here. I'm probably going to talk about this out of order. God, well, I don't want to talk about it out of order because I need to show you the verses on it, so we'll wait till we get there. Let me give you this next one. Let's go back to Jeremiah. Look at 32:41. Yea, I will rejoice over them to do them good, and I will plant them in this land assuredly with my whole heart and with my whole soul. God says, I'm going to plant them in the land. And then Amos, another minor prophet, he's going to talk about the same thing. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. If we'd have read the larger context of these verses, what would we have discovered? We would have discovered that the sowing was not the 1948 return, neither was it the return unto the Medes and the Persians. When He sows them back into that land and they'll never be plucked up again, folks, that is the issue of the kingdom. You remember that first reference that I gave you in Jeremiah 31? Does anybody know what Jeremiah 31 also has in it? Not only am I going to bring them back in and sow them into the land, what else does Jeremiah 31 have in it? The new covenant. When does the new covenant get applied? Not after the Lord returns at His second advent, puts down their enemies, sets up the kingdom, and then He gives Israel the new covenant. Jeremiah 31:31. Look, just turn over there. I don't have it on I don't have the whole thing on there, but this is really important. Turn to Jeremiah and look at chapter 31 and verse 31. This is the issue of that new covenant, and I want you to see what's happening here. Jeremiah 31:31, because I don't want us to get confused about when this sowing them back into the land is going to take place, or when this planting them back into the land is going to take place. He that scattereth Israel shall also, what? Bring them back and plant them in the land. Jeremiah 31:31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Now remember, it was in the same chapter, back up before that in verse 10, that he talked about, he that scattereth Israel shall gather him and keep him and all that business. All right, so let's just read now verse 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, northern kingdom, and with the house of Judah, southern kingdom. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. What covenant was that? What covenant was it when He took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt? That was the Mosaic covenant. That was the law. Which my covenant they break. Did they break the law? Yeah. Although I was an husband unto them. I'm going to show you something on this timeline. As this thing comes through, when they come out, look, if here's the Exodus, when they came out of Exodus, God said, I took you by the hand and I was taking you up toward the... And God says, I was a husband unto you. And that's what He was with them. But He says, I'm not going to make a covenant with you after that. I'm going to make a new covenant with you. Verse 33. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, For they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sins no more. And when he talks about those kinds of things, writing some things on their hearts and forgiving their iniquity, and they will all know me. Let me ask you a question. 1948, when they returned, did they all know him? Not even close. They don't know him today either. That is talking about the new covenant that will be given to him in the kingdom. And the only ones that's going into the kingdom is not just if you have Abraham for your father. What do you have to be to make it into the kingdom? You have to be part of the little flock. Do they all know him? From the least of them unto the greatest? I'm talking about the little flock. The little flock knows him. Does the apostate element know him? No. It's not. So the new covenant, folks, is talking about this is when he's going to sow them back into the land. And when he does that, they will never again be plucked up out of it. People think because they're back over there and the UN recognized Israel officially as a nation, that that's somehow the fulfillment of that. And so what is going to happen if in the future those Arab nations get together and push Israel out of that land again? What are all those prophecy teachers going to be talking about then? People are going to look at that and they're going to go, well, I guess God broke His promise. Or they'll revise the date, or they'll do some other kind of thing. Exactly right. All right, so anyway, let me get us back onto this. Plant them in the land. And this is, let's see, I don't want to lose track of where I am. That's the second aspect of Jezreel. Let me just get back to that. That second aspect of Jezreel. The first one is I'm going to scatter them. That's a punishment. The second one is I'm going to gather them back in the land and I'm going to sow them unto me in the land, and they're not going to be plucked up out of that land anymore. If you're a member, if you're living in Israel, even though you're about to be carried away captive by the Assyrians, do you believe that you still have a promise that God isn't through with you yet? You should, exactly. You should, because, Well, you know what? I'm sure a lot of them doubted that. Absolutely. And so, now, let's move back to Hosea, because we're trying to get to verse 9. Hosea is going to have a second child. So here it is. And she conceived again and bare a daughter, and God said unto him, call her name Lor-Hama. This has got to be a name for the sake of sending a message, not something that just flows off your lips, right? For I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. So the name Lor-Hama, that name means, I'm going to write it, but I'll put it on the board. Lor-Hama means no mercy. In other words, God says, guess what? Now, I'm taking mercy away from... It's it. That's it. Now, you guys are going to go away. I've quit being merciful with you. So the first one is, I'm going to scatter you, but don't worry, I am going to bring you back. The second one is, now I'm going to utterly take you, and my mercy is finished with you. But you know what? It's only, at this time with Hosea, it's only finished with the northern kingdom of Israel, not the southern kingdom. Take a look at this. And back in Hosea, this is on the kids' sheet. So why does Hosea name her that? Because God's mercy is being withdrawn from the northern kingdom. Here it is, Hosea 1. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah. Judah didn't always have a good king. But God, they weren't where the northern... Can I just tell you something? I've wondered about this all the time. The fifth course of punishment really happens at two different times over a century apart. But the way God always talks about it is He really marks that fifth course of punishment when the southern kingdom goes away captive to Babylon. Yes, we have the record of the northern kingdom going away captive to Assyria, but God really doesn't really start counting all the... they go away captive, but God, the timeline kind of goes with the southern kingdom of Judah. Do you know, it's sort of like God is... You know why? Because Jerusalem is sitting in the southern kingdom. It's almost as though God is using the northern kingdom as a warning to the southern kingdom. Do you see what I did with them? That's what I'm going to do with you if you get in that same condition. And so, I think there's some interesting implications upon that. So he says, "But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow or sword or battle or horses or horsemen." So that's not how I'm doing it. So the message here for Israel is that now the fifth course of punishment is going to come on them. There's no stopping it. It's not reversible any longer. Chapter 1, verse 8. "Now when she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, call his name Lo-ami." Now, if her name means no mercy, he says, "Call his name Lo-ami, for you're not my people, and I will not be your God." God has not only now withdrawn His mercy from Israel, but with Lo-ami, He is completely disowning them. "I will not be your God, and you won't be my people." My mic is cut now? Sorry. That better? Okay. So, I'm not going to be your God. You're not going to be my people. Guess what's going to happen to this relationship? When they came out of Egypt, "And I was a husband unto you." When God says, "I'm totally disowning you." That's exactly right. God is going to give Israel a bill of divorcement. In fact, there is an entire book in the Old Testament that is Israel's bill of divorcement. God says, "I put you away." There's something interesting about that. When they're scattered among the Gentiles, God treats them like the Gentiles. When the Gentiles were cut off from God at that time, when He gets to hear, "You're not my people, and I'm not your God," they're going to be treated the same way as the Gentiles. There's nothing there. Now look in Hosea 1. So here's the third child, Lo-ami. And that means Israel is no longer going to be God's people. This is in the kids' notes. Now Hosea 1. If verse 9 said, remember how verse 9 ended? "I'm not going to be your God, and you're not going to be my people." Look at verse 10. "Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, You are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, and appoint them one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel." What do you mean the day of Jezreel? When they're sown back into the land. See how the day of Jezreel has two meanings to it there? One of those is the fifth course of punishment. I'm scattering you out there. And then you know what? It's going to be Lo-ruhamah. You're out of, now you're gone. There's no reversing it. I'm not going to rescind that or repent of that. And Lo-ami, I'm not your God. You're not my people. I'm no longer, we're going to read the verse, "I'm no longer a husband unto you. I have put you away because of how you have been, like Gomer, an adulteress that was unfaithful to your God." And that's what, but he says, then he turns right around and he goes, "But even though I'm going to do all of that, in the same place where I said to you, you're not my people, There is coming a day where I'm going to say unto you, you are the sons of the living God. Do you know what that is supposed to do to them? To know, even though they are cast away, they are not cast away forever. And that is the thing that Paul is going to pick up on. When he's over there in Romans 9 and they're wondering, look, okay, we may have known that just because we went away captive, God one day was going to give us the kingdom. One day He was going to plant us back in the land. It was going to be that day of Jezreel. But has He changed His mind about that? Because we didn't know anything about this dispensation of grace and Him working with Gentiles. Has that nullified the promise? And what Paul is saying is, the promise that he made about this is still in effect. Here's the one caveat to that. He is not going to do this until He finishes what He's doing with this dispensation of grace. But He is going to do it. You know what the problem is? People are impatient. And God is not. Because, you know when they want it to happen? In their lifetime. I get that. God's saying it's not important when it happens, it's just important that it happens. And when it happens, and look, He's not stalling just for the sake of making everyone miserable. He is doing something in the meantime that is vital to His eternal purpose. Okay, so let's see where we're going next. So that's going to compare with this. Look at Hosea 1:10 now in Romans 9:25. Microphone? It's on there, but not on the recorder. I don't know what's going on with that. It's still not? Now? Now? Cover your ears. Now? No? Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Really? Is that it?
Yep.
I got it. Take a look up there at Hosea 1 and Romans 9. I'm afraid to move. The part in yellow. Let's just compare those if we can. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, that it shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living God. Now look how Paul says this. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there shall they be called the children of the living God. That's the verse he's calling on to say, do you remember how bad you were when God sent you away into captivity and what all He did? He disowned you. He took away His mercy from you. He scattered you among the nations. He gave you a bill of divorcement. He put you away. But He says in that same place, that's why Jezreel has two meanings. In that same place, you know what He's going to... Oh, I hope this will... Now, we'll get there. Look, let me just show you this. Hosea 2:1. Say ye unto your brethren, Ami, and to your sisters, Ruhamah, plead with your mother, plead. Look, here's where he is in Hosea 2. For she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. What did God do? He put Israel away. That relationship is not there. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight and her adulteries from between her breasts. Now when he says that, take a look at verse 14. Now there's chapter 2, verse 1. Chapter 2, verse 14. We read this a moment ago. This is what I kept wanting to go back to, and I said, no, I'll wait till we get there. When He returns at the Advent and He gets ready to set up this kingdom, here is what He's going to do with Israel. What status is she in? He's no longer a husband. She's without mercy. God says, I'm not your God, you're not my people. But now look what's going to happen there. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. When this all gets ready to set up for the kingdom, you know what God is going to do? He's going to do some things to bring Israel back and become her husband again. And I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope. And she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. We read that in Exodus 32. What was she when she came up out of the land of Egypt? She had him for her husband. It's going to be, he said, therefore, when this happens, that's the way it's going to be again. I'm going to return all of that to her. And so, behold, this is the verse we read a while ago. See, I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant that I brought, although I was a husband unto them. He said, I still was. That relationship was still there. God is saying He's going to reconcile with Israel one day, and He's going to be a husband to her again. Hosea 2:14, therefore, behold, I will allure her, speak comfortably unto her, give her her vineyards, she shall sing there, and just as when she came out of Egypt, I'm going to be a husband to her again. That's when He's going to sow her in the earth. That's when that, and that's that, by the way, sowing her in the earth is a pretty neat deal. I'm trying to say this, and you have to be careful what you say these days. People get offended at all kinds of stuff. I'm trying to think of a way to say this. You ever heard or read, it comes out of the Bible, but you ever heard of the Beulah land concept? Beulah land, that comes out of the Scripture. And when he talks about sowing her into the earth, when he talks about this Jezreel concept, that sowing her into the earth, or in other words, sowing her back into her own land, which God promised her, that is that Beulah, the earth, land concept. Because, well, let me show you this verse. Hosea 2:19. And I will betroth thee. This is talking about the remarriage here. I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment and in loving kindness and in mercies. I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know the Lord. Now there's that, but I have one more to show you. Isaiah 6. Oh, I did this, didn't I? And I will sow her unto me in the earth. We saw that. And I'll have mercy on her that had not. Remember this was the Laura Hama thing, the no mercy. She that didn't get mercy, now she's going to get mercy. And I'll say to them which were not my people, the Lo-Ami, that you are my people, and they'll say, thou art my God. Now Isaiah 62, thou shalt no more be termed forsaken, neither shall thy land any more be termed desolate, but thou shalt be called Hephzibah, and thy land Beulah. This is what I'm trying to get to. For the Lord delighteth in thee, and thy land shall be married. That's the Beulah land concept. When I sow you into the land, it means God's saying, I'm marrying you again. Yeah, you rebelled against me. You played the harlot. You did all of that. And I put you away from me. And I took away my mercy from you. And I said, I'm not your God. You're not my people. I'm no longer your husband. But when the kingdom comes, I guarantee you in 1948, the Beulah land concept didn't happen. The new covenant didn't happen. But when He establishes them with regard to that kingdom, He is going to plant them, sow them back into the land. We'll call that land Beulah because I'm going to be your husband all over again here. So that Jezreel concept was true when they were scattered, and now it's true when they're planted. They're going to be remarried after the second advent of Jesus Christ. That's what now Paul, I really believe if Paul was standing here, he'd stand up right here and he'd say, I'm really glad we went through all that because you need to understand that so that you'll get what I wrote in Romans 9. Because I want Israel to know that what God was committed to and all those promises that He made to them back there about that, even though they knew nothing about a dispensation of Gentile grace, He hasn't changed His mind about doing any bit of that. He's going to do it all. And if you're a member of the remnant and you're hearing that, that has got to bring you some comfort, doesn't it? And I can hear what someone would say, hey, Paul, I've got a question. When is that going to happen? We're always looking at it in a way God's not looking at it. When is that going to happen? Here, let me translate that for you. I need it to happen soon in my lifetime. I want to see that. But let me ask you this. Won't every member of the remnant see that? Sure, there's going to be a resurrection. They're going to see that. And God has not changed His mind. That is the Hosea principle. But He doesn't just quote Hosea. He also quotes Isaiah in chapter 10 and again in chapter 1. So when we come back this next time, we're going to pick up that quote because that's going to complete this answer. Is God finished with Israel forever? Look, in my mind, He could have just given us the Hosea reference and that would have been enough. But He's going to give them 2 more references. And there's some pretty amazing stuff that's sitting in there. Now, we did not get all the way through with these notes, so we'll come back here and we'll pick this up next time. And we're going to start off with, I know you can see it right there in your notes, but we're going to talk about the delay principle and the reshaping principle. The 2 ways that God always uses to deal with Israel. Then we're going to go to Isaiah 10, and then we're going to go to Isaiah 1, and we're going to start finishing up Romans chapter 9. But I think when we do it this time, we're going to have a much better understanding than when we went through this the first time, sometime back. All right, let's have a word of prayer and we'll be done. Father, thank you for your word and what it says to us. It is amazing, all the things that are sitting in there. We realize that Paul is quoting this prophet that went all the way back to the time of Jeroboam II. And he continues a prophecy for almost 3 decades before the Assyrians carry Israel away captive. He warned them, and we see that warning ignored. And then we see where they have crossed a point of no return. And then we see where God changes their status and they become accursed. God is no longer with them. He is no longer their God. They're no longer His people. What a ministry Hosea had. To have that kind of a marriage and to name his children so that the nation might really see in an everyday form what they were doing with regard to their relationship with God. As we look at this, may we be reminded that this doctrine that our apostle is writing is meant to transform us so that we not only learn to think about things the way you do, but we see how important it is to do things your way. And we really want to learn the doctrine so that we can do things your way. So when we get to those heavenly places, we'll be able to do things exactly the way you would do them. This is what we're being instructed in. So as we see all of these things, Lord, I think all of these things work to help lay a foundation and build on that foundation these aspects of godliness in us. Thank you for that privilege. Thank you, Lord, that I get to do this together with these, my friends.